We are in an era, some call the age of Aquarius, others call the Kali Yuga, others call the end of a time, the end of a world. It's the end of the unipolar world. What hurts me is that I was among those who, when Talon was elected at the beginning, I was very happy because I was convinced that Patrice Talon would enter a dynamic of epistemological rupture and reject ties with France-Africa. But how does the rapprochement with President Tihani happen? It has been done for a long time, and by, I want to say, a political affinity. Political affinity for a general in the army who has led the war for a long time. But you know, there's a saying that sometimes to overthrow a system, you need to know it deeply. And Niger has arrived. But what Niger did in a year, it's been many years since we've seen a country in such a rapid manner enter into a process of reclaiming its resources, reclaiming its destiny and dynamic.
Sovereignty,
fundamental.
French. Of a new country in the AES, is Tiani a traitor? Why did he work for so many years for a pro-Western regime and then suddenly decide, as if by chance today, to come and fight for Africa out of the blue? Is it normal? Is it even feasible? What is happening in the West? That's what we'll see today. Hello everyone, new React video. We will listen together to the recent interview of KAMITE, who reveals very important information. Being a quite influential person and often even in contact with decision makers, he has access to information well before it becomes public or before certain things are practiced. And from time to time, as is the case in this interview, he drops certain information, certain news that helps us better understand what is happening and to be more or less confident, more or less cautious, more or less prepared for the current events unfolding. So let's listen to him and we'll meet at the end of the video.
And contrary to what Joseph Borrell, the European diplomat, the dying man, was saying, and I call him the dying man because he behaves like a colonizer, and neo-colonialism is dying more than ever. He said that the West, or at least Europe, was a paradise, and the rest was barbaric, and that the global South was considered barbaric. I want to say that one person's paradise is another's barbarity, and many of us understand that the world's circumference extends over a very wide surface area, the real world. And this world is not solely represented by the Western oligarchy, which is fortunate. Today, our people do not want to be subjected to any entity. The narrative of the neocolonial system is to say that when we denounce French neocolonialism, it means we are Russian agents. They said the same about Lumumba, calling him a Soviet agent. They said the same about Mandela, calling him a pro-Soviet. They mentioned in a different context the same thing about diasporic militants, labeling them as pro-Soviet communists. However, our message remains very straightforward and simple. We simply say that we oppose those who want to plunder our resources, whatever they may be, and we align ourselves with those who seek to be part of a movement to also overturn the unipolar world order in which we currently exist, to strongly contribute to establishing a multipolar world.
Presidential. The battles, yes, but with a certain intensity. Some even speak of excess, while with Russia, for example, you do not hide your friendship.
But you are not in a global dynamic of saying that I am not objective with everyone. I was an honored guest at the Russian parliament 2 years ago. The Russians are geostrategic allies because they fight Western hegemony, like the Iranians, and on other points, the North Koreans. The North Korean, I haven't made contact yet, maybe there is some, but like other countries that are opposed to Western dominance and with whom we are clearly working together. When European or American institutions support African organizations, they are referred to as democratic African organizations. When it is Pan-Africanist organizations allied with nations that challenge Western hegemony, they are labeled as Russian pawns or others. No, we are engaged in strategic partnership logics. But I was an honored guest at the Russian parliament, and I clearly told the Russians, who are our allies, that we are allies today, but the day we feel they cross the line, we will tell them directly. And it was very well understood in Russia. The Russians understood very well because they appreciate people who tell them they support sovereignty. Because in Russia, they are less in a dynamic of submission towards African countries than what I see from the French oligarchy very clearly.
Benin is waiting for you in Turin, but back then, not Benin itself.
Talons. I visited not too long ago. Many people in Benin are exhausted by the regime. And many people in Benin support our struggle. I don't want to engage in a pointless debate tonight. The only thing I say is that Benin will be sovereign again. sooner or later. It's a matter of the time. My problem, I will go further. It's not even talons. My main issue is, I think, maybe due to political naivety of some of our African elites who believe we can work with those who helped destroy Libya, destabilize the Sahel, and plunder our resources, who colonized us yesterday and continue to colonize us today. And what pains me is that I was among those who, when Talons was first elected, I was very happy. Because like many others, I believed that it was a sovereignist path compared to someone like Lionel Zinsou. Because I was convinced that Patrice Talons would enter a dynamic of epistemological break and reject ties with France Africa. Sadly, time proved me wrong. But I am convinced that Benin will become what it must be. The focus should be to regain our full sovereignty. And everyone, ideally in Benin, from all sides, should understand that breaking away from the French neo-colonial system should be an obsession. There is another world that is now emerging in this 21st century. It is a world the West denied, a world the West wanted to disdain, a world the West wanted to ignore. But this world is now taking root, and the BRICS are one of its many examples. And I think everyone needs to understand that we can no longer stay in the old world and talk about development, because you can't develop anything on quicksand. But how did the connection with President Tahani, it happened a long time ago, and through, I would say, a political affinity. We all have the same goals. We want self-determination for our people. Political affinity for an army general who has for a long time led the presidential war effort. But there's a saying that sometimes to overthrow a system, you must understand it deeply and thoroughly. And I think that the experience of the state, as it is often said, that the CNSP members had, that the CNSP members have, and that General Eka, General Siani had, was a crucial element in leading the revolution he has been leading for a year now. Let's not forget that it is the last country that currently, because others will soon join this dynamic, I say this without much need to elaborate, but I say it firmly and surely. Like, we will return to it if necessary. But it is the latest country. There was Mali, there was Faso, and Niger arrived. But what Niger did in a year, it's been many, many years since we've seen a country in such a rapid manner enter into a process of reclaiming its resources, reclaiming its destiny, and a dynamic of fundamental sovereignty. And I truly believe that if the generals, General Tiani, the head of state, and CNSP members did not have this knowledge of the state, this deep understanding, I think we wouldn't have reached such a level of density in terms of epistemological break from the neo-colonial system. And I believe that in a few years, the CNSP revolution will be studied in all African universities, very clearly. Because we are in the central revolution of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century, with a government that has taken its responsibilities, people who took their responsibilities, who decided to risk everything, to overturn a system that was sustained by electricity, on uranium, the French oligarchy and the West, while our people were starving, and who managed to turn the tables so that today, gradually, it is a difficult fight because we face powerful enemies, I can say, to all our people on the continent, in the diaspora, in the Antilles watching us, in Oceania watching us, in Canada watching us, in the Americas watching us. I can tell you that this fight that Niger and the CNSP are leading, it's a fight for the black people as a whole. I once chatted with General Tsiani, and he made a statement to me about the civilization of Africa, which reminded me how much the general knows the writings and is deeply immersed in classical African humanities. It's something that outsiders can't imagine, but he has a very scientific understanding of this reality and recalled the various stages our people have gone through. He reminded us that we are in a natural historical cycle, What is happening now is a reversal of sequences. We are in an era some call the age of Aquarius, others call the Kali Yuga, and some call it the end of an era, the end of a world as we know it. It's the end of the unipolar world, and it's the rise of the multipolar world. And Africa, as I say in my books, will become the center of gravity of this multipolar world. Not the center of gravity because of external focus, but the center of gravity because it is the driving force that will flow outward, carrying values that humanity, the rest of humanity, lost. We are a people often labeled as poor in a materialistic sense. The truth is that our people are less obsessed with materialism than Western civilization is obsessed with it. Our principles lie in another realm, and that is why what they call poor, for us it is not. This does not mean we will give up our resources. No, because we also know the world we live in and the world we must adapt to. And that is why we also say that every people has a land, and this land, they have the duty and the right to claim it. This is the reality we face, and it is on this ground that we will move forward. And I know that in France, there are people who understand this sequence, who understand this message. And beyond that, all over the black world, in Haiti, in New Caledonia, in the Antilles, in the Caribbean, in the territories referred to in a colonial manner as overseas, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Guyana, or Reunion Island. This message reaches everyone. In South America, among Afro-American and Afro-Latin populations, this message and this struggle we are leading touches a great number of people. Starting in September, we will go to many places around the world to connect more than ever the black world and the global south. We will visit other countries where there are not only black people. We will connect these worlds to strengthen the power of resistance against Western dominance.
So you have listened. I believe his message is full of hope. It answers a question many people had. He even responded to it in a very interesting way because we had not necessarily thought of it. If we take the case of Tiani, for example, being someone who has long been in the system, he understands the workings, the mechanisms, and knows how to dismantle them, knows how to create levers on the left and on the right to be able to work in the most efficient manner possible because he is familiar with absolutely all the methods and every single code, all the schemes of others, all the schemes of the oppressors. He's a master with years of experience, so they're deeply ingrained in his mind. He masters the processes so well that he has the efficiency today to deploy extraordinary energy to counteract all these years of resistance, fatigue, and frustration. And that is interesting, especially since I recently discussed with a friend and I discussed this question. Is Niger really in a global perspective? I thought, well, based on the actions, it is factual. And the point she raised was that Tiani has worked for the system for a long time. Having spent so many years for the system, hasn't he been corrupted in some way? I told her the most important thing is the actions. And that is precisely what I was mentioning in relation to Alan Foka. I was broadly explaining that one can indeed work for the system and then at a certain point decide to stop. One can indeed work for the system and then at some point become an anti-system supporter, etc. Just because one did something doesn't mean that's the only thing they should be judged on. I do not deny the harm that may have been caused, but right now, factually, we are waging a war. So that's what I wanted to share with you, along with the fact that the global south is currently rising in power. With a fierce determination, I find it very interesting. So on the channel, don't forget to subscribe because we will cover it. We will address these topics one by one. We will see them. We will move forward. And each time you will be kept updated on every victory we achieve, every move we make, and even every defeat we face. I will talk about it. I will detail it here so that we all understand the processes that have been put in place and that inevitably we also learn from mistakes because we will not only have victories in this war. So tell me what you think about it in the comment section and we will meet again in another upcoming video.